All right, hello everybody. Let's jump into this. So let's get this started today. Thank you all for joining up, and I do see some folks rolling in, but I know we have a lot of content to cover, so we'll get going with this. But welcome everybody, and thank you for joining our webinar, Nearshoring, Onshoring, and Reshoring, strategically leveraging global supply chains for resiliency. We're excited to have you today. I'm Greg from Xometry, and I'm excited to introduce you to today's speakers who have experience in global supply chain, customer, and manufacturing solutions. To set the stage, let's take a step back and consider the broader manufacturing landscape. Over the past few years, global supply chains have faced a range of disruptions, from pandemics and logistics interruptions to political risks, climate events, and material shortages. While many of these challenges aren't new, their frequency and impact are prompting companies and manufacturers to reevaluate long-standing sourcing strategies. Nearshoring, onshoring, and reshoring are increasingly part of this conversation, not just as a reaction to tariffs, but also as ways to manage complexity and build greater flexibility and control into operations. I'm going to go over our agenda in a moment, and then we'll introduce you to Isabella, Josh, and Rusty, who will be the main presenters for today. Before we get started with that, though, I do want to remind you, the audience, that you can and should submit questions. We love answering questions. Within the Zoom webinar, you can use the Q&A tab, and you can submit those questions, and I can't encourage this enough. We have seasoned experts on the line, and we're happy to talk more and dive deeper if needed. We'll get to as many as possible in a live Q&A session at the end of this hour. And we'll also work to follow up with any outstanding questions, so please ask away. This webinar is also going to be recorded, and we'll email you that recording so you can rewatch it or share it with your colleagues. So as I mentioned, I'm going to introduce you to the crew in just a second here, but to kind of go over the overall landscape of what we're going to be talking about today. At first, Isabella is going to talk about trends in reshoring, onshoring, and nearshoring. Josh is going to go through and talk about how companies are finding opportunities to minimize some of the risks that we're seeing today, as well as Xometry's role in global capacity. Rusty, our solutions engineer, will also go over some really compelling case studies to show you real examples of how this is how we've actually adapted to these changes in this global economy. So with that, let's go ahead and introduce the panelists today. And actually, Isabella, if you want to start introducing yourself, and we'll bring Rusty and Josh on, and I'll let you take it from here. Thank you so much.
All right, it's nice to be with you all today. So my name is Isabella Bennett. I'm an associate partner with McKinsey's geopolitics practice. And I'm here to give you all some of the bigger picture, and then I'll turn it over to Rusty and Josh to talk through what you guys can actually do about it. I'm sure you're, tracking many of the trends in the news, but we wanted to give you all some grounding before we jump into the actions you can take. My background is at the U.S. Treasury in addition to McKinsey, so I have a little bit of experience trying to negotiate many of these types of agreements we'll hear about today, and that I think are driving many of the changes that you all are trying to adapt to. So with that, I think Rusty and Josh, you want to introduce yourselves or take it over when you start your sections?
Yeah, I'll do it right now. Principal Solutions Engineer at Xometry. I provide the connective tissue to land complicated projects across a wide variety of manufacturing disciplines, customers, and regions. And yeah, I'll be going through our case studies and some of the production offerings that Xometry has for you. Josh?
Yeah, and hey, Josh, Blancet here. I've been with Xometry for 5 years. I am a senior account executive here and mainly work on consultation and solutions to clients mainly in the aerospace and energy sectors, but really focused on tailoring production and sourcing strategies, which include regional cost comparisons, inventory management, structured delivery schedules, et cetera. So happy to be here.
All right, so I'll give you all a few trends. Rusty, if you want to flip to the next page and we can dive in. So I think you all are seeing tariffs headlines every day, probably, and that is making many companies rethink how to build the supply chain and what parts are needed for which tools that can actually provide long-term stability in your supply chain. But of course, other trends are affecting these as well. So there were major export control announcements yesterday, for example, on chips related to Huawei. We're seeing a lot of technology and IP considerations come into some of the negotiations over tariffs, as these negotiations now try to focus on things called, quote, non-tariff barriers. Investment restrictions and sanctions apply to a lot of high-tech industry as well, which I know is relevant to many of you. And then while we are seeing, at least here in the United States and across the globe, of people are kind of focused on this US tightening of trade policy, there are many other regions that are forming new trade agreements. And so while there is tightening and some risk increasing in terms of certain trade corridors, we're also seeing other trade corridors grow a lot. And so it's not just about risk, it's about how to actually optimize and be able to take advantage of some of those opportunities. So one of the things that I think you all are familiar with, but just to ground it in data in terms of the disruption of trade policy that we're seeing now, the average tariff rate, so weighted average based on how much a good is coming, how much value a good is worth, and the tariff rate that applies to that good is higher now than it's been in the 1930s. It is dropping this week, but it is still higher than it's been since the 1930s. So for 50 years, the United States was basically motivated by trying to lower tariff rates on other countries in the hopes that countries would then in turn lower tariff rates for US exports. We're seeing this total reversal in how countries are thinking about trade, in particular the United States, as there is this goal to try to reshore and build jobs, address longstanding trade deficits, and also to think through what sectors are important for national security that are preferable to actually having the goods closer to where they are manufactured and where they're going to be needed. So this is true for the United States, but it is also true in all of the major economies that are thinking about how to nearshore and reshore and build agreements to get access to critical minerals that don't rely on countries that they would prefer not to rely on. And so there's a lot going on here that creates, yes, risk, but also a lot of opportunity if your company can think through how to be a first mover and how to take advantage of this moment of disruption, because it is a moment of disruption. And so these transitions always kind of rejigger the game board, and it's a moment to win if you all can think through what you actually want to do about it. I'm sure that this will not come as any surprise to you, but when you look at the S&P 500 and earnings calls and surveys that we have done at my company, executives around the world are worried about changes in trade policy, and this is one thing that is driving business decisions globally for all companies, whether they are big and small. And so it is important to kind of keep that in mind, because these nearshoring trends are being driven not only by the competitive landscape and thinking through what your competitors are exposed to versus what you are exposed to, but also, of course, by a lot of very rapidly shifting policy updates. There's a statistic that the Section 232 investigations, which are related to national security, this administration has launched over half of the Section 232 investigations that have existed in the 100 years that this authority has existed in the past 5 months. So just to give you all a sense of kind of the rate of change here, which I'm sure you feel day to day, given your attempts and your kind of reactions to the headlines. All right. In terms of what this is, like, are we seeing the tariff-related changes and some of these policy updates already translate into shifts in business? Absolutely. We see consumer data. 80% of consumers are saying that they are thinking about scaling back their consumption already. And we are seeing this translate into port data as well. So relative to last year, 2024, in the first week of May, container shipments into the port of LA were down 33%. This is the week in early May when the impact of a ship transiting from China would have been felt, because that journey is roughly 2 to 6 weeks, depending on depending on some of the details. So we are seeing this translate already into business decisions. Of course, this week there is the shift now in the US-China trade deal. So we might see this tick back up, which just speaks to some of the rapid change and the kind of challenges, but also the opportunities for you all to think through what your supply chain needs and how you actually want to gain stability in your supply chain, and take advantage of some of the opportunity relative to your competitors based on what makes sense for your businesses. I can share some examples. Bigger company case studies. So they're really interesting policy and company policy and strategies that are being used right now. So, for example, in order to avoid tariffs, Delta is any plane that is produced is first being rerouted to a different country and flown there. And then when it comes into the United States, it's classified as a used airplane rather than a new airplane, and that is subject to a different tariff rate. Converse and Columbia Sportswear are thinking about different things that they can do to their products to have it qualify for a different HS code, and then it is qualified for a different tariff rate. So, for example, Converse is just placing fuzzy material on the soles of their shoes, and then it's not a shoe or a sneaker, it's a slipper. There's a lot of really interesting engineering going on. I think for a lot of your companies or some of your companies that may be more technical, these will be even more interesting because the rules are even more complex. All right. So I'll turn it over.
Awesome. Yes, thank you, Isabella, for the insight there. And now that we've discussed the trends and the or the macroeconomic forces shaping the market, yeah, as we move into this market reset, companies are rethinking their supply chain strategies. And why is it good to have a dual source strategy in place? Having multiple suppliers protects you from the impacts of supply shock. So if you have any uptick in demands, and right now, the current climate is an opportunity for companies to really rethink their supply chain strategies and go through the steps of creating a more diverse supply base to ensure that you are protected against, any force majeure events, in the long term to leave the situation better than you were before it ever happened. And a lot of you on this phone call, 3 months ago, might not have even really been thinking about your supply chains because programs were running seamlessly, or your line was only down for a couple times a year, and you could stay on schedule, et cetera. But now with the geopolitical shifts and the macroeconomic focus, building the most robust supply chains with true strategic partners has become a main priority, that will provide substantial return in unknown times. And really, up until this point, there were really three pillars of sourcing decision making: price, lead time, and quality. And now we are seeing a fourth pillar, which is this strategic partnership of making sourcing decisions. So what you're seeing here is a tangible outcome of our intentional sourcing strategy that we just discussed. Our global footprint serving customers in 51 countries across 4 continents is not just about expanding for the sake of growth. It's a strategic move that directly aligns with building a more resilient and diversified supply chain. With headquarters in the US, Europe, and Asia, we are uniquely positioned to support our customers regardless of where disruption may strike. And this global presence really gives us the ability to rapidly adapt to market changes and shifts in geopolitical landscapes, which helps ensure continuity, flexibility, and localized support. So, as we talked about earlier, price, lead time, quality, and now strategic partnership, this map really illustrates how we're able to deliver on all 4 pillars there. Next slide. And by expanding into so many different countries, we are able to offer this expansive menu of manufacturing capabilities to our customers. Because we grew in the manner that we grew, we've always by default tapped into the specific expertise that lies within that specific country of origin for manufacturing. And so while one country may be better off at die casting or CNC machining, turning, sheet metal, injection molding, whatever the case may be, we're tapping into each of those different areas of expertise in order to provide our customers with a robust supply chain solution that hits on all four pillars that we discussed by default: price, lead time, quality, and strategic partnership.
Yeah, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on what some of those production offerings are. Next slide, please. Yeah, so characterizing production kind of goes hand in hand with defining it. Production means different things to different people. No two customers are alike. Very few programs are alike. But this menu of common characteristics, processes, and terms is generally how Xometry would define production. And I'm sure the customers who are watching on this call can look at this and identify that they have programs and work with us that might contain one, two, or the entire checkbox yes to all option of what production could entail. So we are able to provide a diverse array of inspection requirements, including highly rigorous and documentation-intensive processes like PPAP and AS9102. We collaborate with partners and customers to create custom gauging and fixtures when necessary. Material trace is most commonly used to demonstrate domesticity or DFARS compliance in material. Real-time updates of work in process. If you have a utopic condition of having 1,000 components out with us in production at any given time, that condition is only as good as your visibility into the statuses of those various components. Ramp rate is also something that could be managed in real time. Safety stock and Kanban management become a lot more important in just-in-time manufacturing, which is something we're seeing quite a bit of in recent months. Secondary supply chain planning, of course, is inseparable from the fundamental topic of this conversation. We do quite a bit of dual and multi-vendor sourcing, some of which we'll explain momentarily. And then assembly and subassemblies. We run the gamut of complexity from simple PEM nut installation and helicoils all the way up through wiring up electromechanical devices, little robotics projects, and minor industrial activity. So all that to say, this is the broad range of production characteristics that Xometry is capable of supporting in our global network. Yeah, what does production support look like? Well, it looks different than transactional business. There are times when you want to optimize your activities for click it and get it real quick, and there are times when you want to optimize your activities for rigor. And rigor optimization means program management. Program management is a specific team and discipline within Xometry. They are fundamentally the SWAT team of making sure that things get produced and inspected and shipped in the correct manner and timing. And your production projects will feature a matrix organization with each of these roles contained within them. Let's talk about some examples. One example fundamentally describes a real estate lockbox. There aren't too many names in the game, so if you've ever bought or sold a house, you're probably familiar with this product. If you take an engineering consideration of this product, you're actually left thinking of it as a device that has multiple manufacturing disciplines, including molding, casting, machining, rod bending, and some electronics. And suddenly a simple device that you probably ignore in your day-to-day life becomes a really fascinating thing to think about. Our partner, or excuse me, our customer was in a bind on this particular project. They were in a bind because a redesign effort was simultaneously failing validation while one of their manufacturing partners, a Taiwanese entity not connected to Xometry, informed them on unpleasantly short notice that they were shutting down operations. They came to us for a simultaneous redesign, validation, and gradual increase of product maturity on these redesigned components. So we went additive, CNC, urethane cast, injection mold, while reshoring. This is a lot of stuff. Just to make things more interesting, they had 2 months of equipment left on the shelf, and they would have to lay off blue-collar workers if they were unable to get more parts in time. So what did we do? Well, we went through the design iteration procedure that was described a minute ago. We developed an injection mold tool with a partner in China. During that process, we were connected with an injection molding partner in California. We created the tool in China, created a safety stock that would ship along with it, shipped the tool, which takes longer than shipping the safety stock, and started producing domestically. Supply was never interrupted, nobody got laid off, and real estate agents don't have to think any harder to lock and unlock houses going forward. Um, Things to keep in mind here. The diversity of stuff involved in this product is what makes it interesting. The timing makes it very interesting, and the ability to coordinate across cultural barriers, language barriers, time zones, and technologies resulted in a successful activity. That's the kind of thing that we do here at Xometry. This is another really interesting project. This is a military drone developed by an Israeli entity that is being transitioned to domestic US production, along with a significant scope increase. This was challenging for a variety of reasons. A lot of the spec sheets for the catalog parts were literally written in Hebrew. A lot of the components were designed with local manufacturer over there in mind. And there was quite a bit of bomb digestion, trying to find equivalents, matchmaking, proving it, as well as fundamental partner selection. The partner selection was a challenge because of the diversity of the BOM. Again, we had CNC, additive, injection molding, wire harnesses, composites. There was a rich diversity of parts requiring some pretty detailed and experienced program management. Good thing we have it. First articles were produced successfully. Integration tests produced the kind of minor red lines that integration tests always produce. We're entering low rate manufacture or low rate initial production now, and this is widely regarded as a significantly successful event and has resulted in about a 15x increase in activity with this particular customer.
The next slide's my slide here, which is going to be reminding everybody. So we have a few case studies here, but we really have a professionals, and we love to talk shop. So please get some questions ready. Submit those through the Q&A tab. We see a few coming in, and as we're working through the next case study here, any questions you have, or even any experiences that you may have questions about, we're always happy to answer and think and take our experience and help share that with you. All right, I'll leave it back to you, Rusty.
Greg, you nailed it. Yeah, so this one is called nearshoring with an asterisk. It's not the explicit definition of that term as it's often defined, but we found it to be relevant and timely. This was an example where we had a customer who was happily producing a rock climbing fall arrest device out of a partner of ours in China and had been for some time on the fence. Their corporate policy was we are reluctantly producing parts in China and only doing so because they could go through a trusted organization like ours to manage the realities of international production. To phrase it a different way, they were one small shove away from saying, we're not going to do this. That one small shove happened. You probably saw it if you read the news. So that one small shove jettisoned an effort to relocate this from China to India, to simultaneously dual source to make sure that no shipments were interrupted, ultimately re-execute the PPAP. And for those on the call not educated in PPAP, it's a formal, generalized and standardized sequence of locking in production characteristics. So once a part is PPAP'd, you have the sourcing, the tooling, the programming, the method, the statistical control to know that this thing is locked. So PPAP's important. Optimally, you do it once, and it can be an expensive activity. But we were able to borrow, replicate, ship fixtures, ship devices, and transfer quite a bit of knowledge from China to India. And the net of this operation is the final cost, very close, indistinguishable, frankly, and no shipments missed. So we were able to provide a really discerning value to this particular customer in a rapid time frame, like fast enough that it got started while the tariffs were as hot as they were. And yeah, we consider this a pretty significant success and indicative of how agile manufacturing can be. That's all I have here. Next slide. Resources. Xometry is a library. We're a manufacturing service, we're a technology company, and we also have a rich depth of useful information on our website. I confess I underestimated it when I was a new employee here. We're constantly adding new data, and it is an awesome way to learn more about every nook and cranny of the manufacturing and supply chain space.
Yeah, and before I turn it over to Greg to field some of the questions that we have, this is really the bread and butter of what Xometry does. We've been doing this for years, even before COVID, but COVID really accelerated our reshoring and onshoring efforts. And if you want to learn more, I encourage you to get in touch with your sales rep for more information. We do, supply chain consultations. So get in touch with your sales rep. If you don't know who that is, you can get in touch with Greg Paulson. His information is here, and he will point you in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely always happy to help connect our customers and our is really our supply chain with the right links that we have here at Xometry. And thank you, Rusty, by the way, because my team makes a lot of the resources on our site, so we're really happy to hear that
Yeah.
they're working as well.
Yeah. Tip of the hat to the chef. Like really consistently valuable content on there.
And we're growing too. And honestly, just contextually, as we're talking about this, even this webinar itself, there have been new questions to answer, things that we've seen a little bit of, but especially in the last several months, when you're talking about resilient supply chain, how what questions are being asked now when someone's supply chain, which may have been regular, could be at risk or could be more expensive all of a sudden. And this goes to the first question I have, which is, what's the typical timeline for a customer who's evaluating these options like reshoring, nearshoring uh, with Xometry? And also, how does that conversation start? That's my
Uh,
question to lead on to that one. So yeah,
yeah. I'll jump into that.
yeah,
Like all good engineering questions, the answer is it depends. So for starters, the volume, scope, and manufacturing disciplines involved in your project, whether or not that project is infantile or mature. So let's consider a couple of examples. You could be a major automotive customer with a up and running and happy with it stamping operation in Shenzhen. Uh, that takes some doing in order to relocate. A lot of that is due to the rigor of certification and inspection. Automotive is particularly challenging. That's probably not a surprise to anyone on the call who's ever worked in that space. In that case, we're looking at, I mean, I would be conservative and say 4 to 8 weeks to get another location started, because the digestion of the content of such a project can be so challenging. You could have a single component that fits in the palm of your hand, but you're making 100,000 of them, and they're safety critical to a vehicle. It's going to take some time. Conversely, consumer products that are non-regulated industries, if all you're making is an injection molded plastic component that has but one use in its life, and that particular component is not a work of art, we could give you multiple quotes in other locations the same week. We could begin to understand the tariff and logistics considerations in 72 hours, is typical turnaround time if we're fully equipped with all the right information. And of course, the truth of the project that the asker was asking about is probably somewhere in between those two. But we'd love to know about it. Get in touch. Let's see the drawings. Let's have a conversation.
and I know Josh, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but does Xometry have the same capabilities in the U.S. as it does internationally? So someone's looking to resource something that they may be outsourcing right now.
Yes,
Or
yes, we do. It's region dependent. So, like I was mentioning earlier, different regions have different expertise and different manufacturing methods. So, depending on what technology is needed, would um, point us in the right direction in terms of region, and then we do further development, like Rusty mentioned, with logistics, cost analysis from there. But we have reach in 51 different countries, like I said, and we can find a solution for you in one of those regions.
Yeah, and I think it's funny we listed 18 languages. You get more than that just with our network in India. Um, we are more diverse than many customers who are new to us sort of assume, right? In the manufacturing competencies. Josh correctly points out that some of our capabilities are regionally based. However, I would posit the general statement that we could do the vast majority of the stuff that we do anywhere, and that the gaps and strengths and weaknesses in our regional network are strategically overcomable and stuff that we work with every day. So consider the regionality to be there would be very few instances in which that was a significant driver of what you're trying to do.
This is the power of marketplaces, right? You know, that's
Mhm.
when you look at that, it's celebrated diversity that is the manufacturing base. And this, in our case, we have the global reach as well. And again, especially with current concerns, it's really changed. And that leads me into a question that I have. And actually, I saw a couple like this, which is, are is Xometry seeing increased demand for US based manufacturing? And I think the caveat is, compared to those who would typically be thinking about offshoring their work.
I would say yes. It also depends. I think it depends a lot on, um, well, for example, the case study number three, it depended a lot. Cost was the driving factor there. The margin to the customer. Could the company stay profitable on this new product line? But I would say an overarching theme that I am seeing within my personal book of business is we are trying to move domestically as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, so like for technology and defense sensitive stuff, we see a good deal of that. Um, we also see a good deal of don't really want to make it in China anymore. What can you do for us in Turkey and India? And I mean, we're building satellite components in India often. It's seven-figure business for us. We're doing some really interesting work in regions of the world that might surprise you. Um, and I think it's also a great challenge to collect data like that in a meaningful way. We have thousands of buyers. Just our sales arm of the organization alone is nearly 100 people. And collecting the various uh, motivations of customers on a project by project basis is an immense challenge. But anecdotally, yes, technology sensitive stuff seems to be pulling inward. A lot of that is angst driven um, and uncertainty driven. Uh, However, price still remains king. And our India and Turkey networks are seeing an explosion of activity from people who do want to leave China, but don't want to come all the way home yet.
Got it. And actually, I'm pushing this one up to the top. Someone just asked this question, but I think it's contextual as well. And I could also take a little bit of a shot at this too. But so if our business they're asking if our business has a restriction in which countries can be used, how's that identified to the Xometry to ensure no issues with accepting the product? And before I hand it to you, Rusty, because I definitely think this is something we can talk through. But in general, sometimes we see export restrictions like EAR 99, which has a selection of countries that work cannot go to, and our network's already compliant with that. So if work that is EAR 99 can actually be sent out across our global network, it's already within that compliance. And I'll leave the rest to you, Rusty, on that.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different ways. We have, sales, discovery, and illumination are the two words that we throw around quite a bit. And, fundamental project discovery is learning what opportunities there are from our perspective, right? It's learning what your needs are. And then illumination is what are the gotchas? What are the trip hazards? What are the snags? What are the conditions? And, the first pass filter for all of this is, of course, it's our account rep team's job and it's our engineers' jobs to come in and really understand your project needs. So we also have a contract review and a compliance team that reviews all things international, reviews all things that might sneak in under an EAR code or ITAR restriction. Uh, and then there's EAR 99, which, as you point out, EAR 99 is very, what's a good word, compliant. EAR 99 is very flexible. Our internal procedural best practices simply require a statement in writing from the customer that these parts are your 99. We welcome you to source them in China, India, Turkey, uh, non-embargoed countries. We know that non-USA persons will work on these, and we're okay with that. I personally touch a lot of EAR 99 work. We see EAR 99 a lot in non-defense aviation. We see EAR 99 a lot in oil and gas, industrial stuff, motion control, valves, motors, things like that. And we do a great deal of that work in China and India.
Yeah. And
And
go ahead,
I'll
Josh.
just piggyback on that real quick. You know, one of my customers is no China, so everything that they make cannot come from China, but they order a lot internationally. So it's as simple as, sales reps knowing that, myself, our engineering team knowing that, and we quote through India, Turkey, any other region that we can, and then Xometry being the guarantor of quality and the manufacturer of record. We hold compliance standards and quality flow downs we take them very seriously. So once we know that we can't go to China, we just ensure that we have suppliers in India that can do the work, and we send the job to India or Turkey or another region that we can go to that's not China.
Yeah. And one of the things to note too is we've been highlighting about this on the overarching topic. Xometry, like our instant quoting engine, allows you to select some of these needs, including the export and ER restrictions. And that's a great way for you to begin that conversation. And the other side of that is we always want to see the data. We want to spin the CAD. We want to understand your technical need. But the link that's on the screen right now, xometry.com/request dash consultation, is a way that you can reach out if you don't have a direct sales rep yet. And we can arrange time to learn more about what your project needs are. So we have that link there to help us understand where you want to be and how can we help you. And that's when our solutions engineers can really jump into play. So I have some questions. There's actually a Xometry specific question on the platform. Can Xometry's platform integrate with existing procurement or ERP systems?
Yeah, Josh, you want that one? Or you want me to take a swing at it?
Uh, you can take a swing at it, and I'll come over the top.
Sure. You guys leverage Coupa. We have a system called Punchout that makes it trivially simple to order our parts. It effectively teaches your system how to treat us like catalog parts that have part numbers in them, and reduce internal, let's call it non-value add friction time in buying stuff. We also have a feature called TeamSpace. TeamSpace is a free dashboard that is effectively a cosmetologically nice, pretty view of our ERP.
Good
Uh,
UI, yeah.
yeah, it's a great UI UX, uh, and the sole purpose of it is to reduce the number of emails and phone calls of, "Hey, excuse me, can we get an update on this part?" I know there are people probably on this call, frankly, whose jobs are a daily barrage of 20 or 30 of those such messages. And TeamSpace is your magic wand. We have a customer who makes, let's call them weird helicopter type things, where they have a 65-inch flat screen TV set up on one of the walls in one of their labs, and it's connected to a lab asset laptop that just is open to their TeamSpace account all the time. Because at any given time, they have about 150, 200 components out on order with us. And different engineers will ask, "Hey, where's our parts?" And they just get finger pointed, go look at the monitor, and they can see due dates, quote numbers, PO numbers, past order instances. It's quite elegant. Josh, what you got?
You did a great job there. I'd say Punch Out is the easiest way to integrate into internal ERP systems. There's some other ways that we can integrate that are more customizable solutions. So if there's other things that we want to look at doing, that's as simple as having a conversation with us, and we can facilitate that.
Cool. I got one more thing I want to add to that. Another integration that we do that I think is really cool. There are three CAD plugins that we offer for free, which are SolidWorks, Fusion, and what's the third one? Greg, you know this.
Onshape. So we have Onshape, SolidWorks, and Fusion right
Thank
now.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a downloaded usage guide on the website, and this allows an engineer, without exiting the SolidWorks window, to do an instantaneous configuration of the part. So if you're designing something that looks like a doorknob and you just want to input a material and a quantity and say we're going to CNC it, you'll see a little circly wheel for a sec, and then it'll spit out reasonably accurate quotes on the spot for what that part costs to make.
Yeah, those tools are great. Also, as while you're still in the driver's seat, you can change your design and see how pricing is driven by those design changes. And then once you're ready, there's a button click to go to get to your Xometry quote, and that's where you're able to go see all the options that Xometry offers. So that'll bring your file directly up to Xometry's quoting engine, where you can fully configure, put in any certs, tolerances, other features that you have to really make that shape into your part you need.
Yeah, it pairs well with the term tariff engineering that Isabella might have made up herself. I think that's such an elegant term. But it's cost engineering. And so often in the mechanical design process, you're told you have these cost targets and you get to work designing stuff, but you don't actually know how much things cost until you get everything actually done and throw it over the fence to the procurement team and get quotes from partners. So this helps with the principle of a little bit of pretty good data early on is so much more valuable than waiting for really, really good data way later.
And absolutely, that also helps you figure out, am I machining this or moving the die casting? Where's that trade-off? And yeah, like I used to call that CAIV, cost as an independent variable, which as you're doing product development, you want to make sure that you're still in a market fit for the cost of your parts. So I have a question. How do you ensure consistent quality across different suppliers in your network? And by the way, I've only seen a few questions left here, so we're near the end, but if anybody has any more, we got time still. But yeah, how do we ensure consistency across our supplier network?
Yeah. So that's part of the Xometry secret sauce, right? Like partner network manicuring and partner network management is a huge part of the way that we do what we do. Our company has a huge quality organization. We routinely audit partners, particularly those on the top of the food chain who would be ostensibly doing the most, let's call it regulated and rigorous production activity. Um, the quality feedback loops are international and regional at the same time. We have a huge base in China, slightly smaller base in India, huge team in Europe, and obviously a huge team in the US. Um, we are ourselves ITF 16949, AS 9100D, ISO 9001, then the medical one, which is ISO 1345. So the result of that is this immense like cross-pollination of diverse domains of quality expertise that gets proliferated across our entire partner network. Our ERP and quality management system are locked in. One of the reasons, in fact, to work with us in order to do supply chain in a diverse array of places is that you get to see our QMS is let's call it the dominant one.
Yeah.
Our quality standards, our drawing review standards, our inspection methods and templates. Once you get to trust the way that we do it, you know that the way that we do it is the same in India, uh, Kansas. Well, I should have just said India or Indiana. That would have been our kitchen
Yeah,
sink maneuver.
save that for the next webinar. That's a good one.
Totally, we'll
Uh,
kill it next time.
Actually, similar to that, someone else asked, if international is not allowed from a specific country, or like if there's a specific country not allowed. So this is kind of a follow-on to that previous question. What's going to stop a supplier from sending that work to a sub themselves? And I can answer some of this, and some of this has to do with these suppliers are vetted and onboarded through Xometry. In fact, Rusty has been to India doing that himself as well, and they are also under their own agreements, NDAs, and we have a secure chain through. And part of that is they don't sub, so it's us and our partners are continuing to do that work, and those are our controls in place, as well as having physical boots on the ground to help audit across our international areas. You could add on to any of that, but I just, definitely the partner agreement and how we vet is a very good start there.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say from a granular perspective for both Rusty and Greg's responses, our partner onboarding process really requires two vetting processes, if you want to call them that. The first is like you apply to be a partner of Xometry, and we have conversations with you around like how long you've been in business, what machines you have, what type of work do you do, and then we have further conversations about certifications, quality flow downs, et cetera. And then they make test parts for us, which is inspected by our quality team. And once that test part passes inspection, they are onboarded into our network. However, they have restricted access to the jobs that they can perform. And then we take, historical data, which is where the second vetting process comes in. And as suppliers of ours continue to perform well on what we consider, low risk jobs, which is, Jay Blancet at gmail.com uploaded something and wanted it for his garage. They're continually vetted on what we call like our Xometry partner score, which measures quality, rate of on-time delivery, their ease of communication with us throughout the process. And so we are consistently vetting suppliers for quality. And if it drops below what we deem Xometry standard, there's corrective actions that are taking place. We have boots on the ground to do on-site audits, like Greg mentioned. So there's a lot of different steps that we can take, even going as far as removing some from our network, to ensure that Xometry's quality guarantee is achieved.
Absolutely. And Barbara, I just wanted to mention that tariff engineering is real. So put out a code or just a shout it out there. And it's a real strategy, especially in the prototyping phase, which was also a good cue for me to bring up that we do have on as we quote. So under U.S. Customs, there is prototype in production. Prototype is uh, a defined category. And one of the things that we've done to simplify at Xometry is items that are prototype that are under international order, that price you see is all inclusive. So what you see on that price tag is inclusive of any additional duties, fees, and tariffs. So that'll help reduce your uncertainty what's going to happen afterwards. Because I know that there have been some stories, especially recently, of folks ordering one thing and then paying twice as much in duties or fees later on. So we did that to help simplify, especially on the prototype, low volume work that you may be working on. So we have time for a couple more questions here. Let me see what we have. So there's a question about on the platform. Can you actively compare on a platform domestic and international options?
Yeah, well, if I understand the question correctly, that's one of the fundamental tools of the platform. You drag and drop 3D CAD, add your drawings, configure the parts, and you'll see updates in real time of what this part costs to produce domestically, what it costs to produce domestically in a big hurry, and then what it costs to produce internationally. And then platform-wise, we don't currently have a feature that discerns between Chinese or Indian or Turkish manufacturer. We just have international as a catch-all.
Yeah, on the platform, but yeah, that's where you have your sales lead, and we could talk deeper in that conversation.
Right.
Although recently, I mean, we've definitely seen more asks for that need on
Absolutely.
platform itself,
Yeah.
for sure.
So like that leads into an interesting like usage thing, like how does Xometry? The platform is an incredible tool for data now, and I want to buy stuff before lunch. Uh, we offer more nuanced products and services and feedback. I feel like I just want to scream that from a mountaintop. The platform is but one way to transact with us and one way to get data from us. Um, so please don't drag and drop and think that the specific needs of your project exceed the capabilities of Xometry, because the specific needs of your project exceed what the platform can do for you instantaneously.
That's a great takeaway. I think we are done with any open questions. Josh or Rusty or Isabella. Oh, wait, someone just came in. Um, I'll get this one question, and then we'll bring in from closing statements. So, um, oh, there's a question about actually material sourcing. So a question is asking, like, if I am producing in India, but I have a prohibition on, say, for example, China, what's going to prevent the raw material from being sourced in a exclusion country?
So if you specifically include that instruction, then that will be flowed via RQMS to the partner. It'll become
Yep.
part of the job details in ERP, and it'll be something that we uh, audit and manage against our quality system on.
Yeah, and you can select both material certifications as well as material source certification. So we could see full traceability of materials, and that's selectable within the platform. And definitely anything that requires certain materials, you want to request upfront. Very difficult to do after the fact, very easy to do at the quoting stage in order. Yeah, any takeaways, Isabel, Rusty, Josh, before we head out?
I just wanted to add one more annoying engineer and also kind of thing at the end of that, which is I actually recently went down a path on raw material sourcing and had to do a real deep dive on it. And just for planning purposes, the country they dig it out of the ground in is not considered the material of raw material origin or the place of raw material origin. Like where the ore came from is actually irrelevant in any context that I can find. What matters is where it's poured and smelted. And that was so surprising to me that I tried to cross-reference every way I knew how to cross-reference that. But the net there is you could dig dirt out of the ground in China and ship it to India, and India poured and smelted and refined the ore, and that's Indian raw material.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I will add here is overall, like this is so complicated and the guys on the phone are clearly really talented. I mean, even just speaking to what Rusty just said about helping manage, I wish when I was in government that we could have kind of shared this level of expertise with every company that we were talking to about managing this, whole milieu of regulations.
Yeah, and I am doing this stuff every day with my customers, moving things around, bringing things domestically, doing cost analysis in different regions. So I just urge again to get in touch with your sales rep or somebody here at Xometry to have those conversations, and we can help provide a customized, tailored solution to you.
I can't improve on what those two said. So I'm going to call it a webinar for me.
Well, thank you all so much today for joining us. And Isabel, Josh, and Rusty, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on the subject. And we're really happy to have you here. And as well, if there's any other questions, reach out to us. Xometry.com/request consultation is a great way to get in contact with the right lead. And if you have a sales lead, also just give them a bump. We're happy to help. All right. Thank you all so much.